It is 6:30. We have already called the meeting to order before our non-public session, so we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will move on to public comments.
All right, Greg Whitmore, North Road. I got a lot to say, so I'll talk real fast tonight. So I have the meeting notes that were made public by the school board through their talks with Co-Brown and with CHS. And when viewed side by side, they're shockingly different documents. One of which is just a glowing endorsement of Concord High School. And the Co-Brown one is just sowing uncertainty. So let's look at the Co-Brown one first. Let's see. I'm going to read a lot of quotes out of these. So let's see. We also made it clear we wanted any student who wanted to go there accepted regardless of background. It seems like an odd thing to have to state to a school, especially a state that said they would, or a school that would stated they would take any of our students. Do you think that, Co-Brown would reject some of our students? Regardless of background, it's just a very odd statement to say the least. Why is there an additional expenses section in here? So for example, it states Deerfield must pay for any one-on-one paras that a student's IEP requires. And Co-Brown has case managers, shared paraprofessionals that are included in the above tuition rate. Any additional services must be paid for by Deerfield. So by putting this in here, are we saying that we don't pay for these at Concord above the standard tuition rate? Because I really doubt that it's included in the tuition rate when we talk about students at IEPs. There would more than likely be an additional expense. So that seems really odd to have stated it that way. What else we got here? We asked about how Co-Brown dealt with behavior issues and difficult children. They said they're required by law to go through due process procedure and haven't evicted a student in a long time. Why would questions like this be asked? What do you think is going on over there? They're just like any other school. And of course, they're going to deal with behavior issues just like any other school was or is. So again, it's odd the way we're approaching it. Like Co-Brown is this mysterious, weird school. They're just like any other place, and they're going to follow due process procedures like they're supposed to. Let's see here. So also in the same section, let's see, they did explain, however, they usually work with the sending district and a better placement might be found for the student. It's not their responsibility to find the new replacement, but they're willing to give recommendations if asked. Which is why the SAU has a student services director or a special ed director to find what is best suited for each student. All right. And then the whole thing about, they're not really willing to come here and speak to us. We can't have an administrator come and sit down at a school board meeting and talk to us for 30 minutes, just to do a Q&A. It seems kind of odd that they wouldn't be willing to do that. But hey, they do offer an open house type experience in October, November. So let's go with that. Right here, when we look at the Co-Brown, the Concord one, Concord is really reading like a commercial for Concord. Why is there?
It has been 3 minutes. Okay. Unfortunately, we have to cut off public comments at 3 minutes, but there is another public comment at the end if you would like.
It's unfortunate.
Sorry.
Pick up my slack.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm quick. Hi, Nancy Shute, Pleasant Hill Road. Hey, haven't been in attendance lately, but I have been trying to keep up to date with what's going on through the videos and the notes. One thing I read or heard on public comments one time was that a suggestion was made to make Co-Brown the school of record. Just a thought out there from me that I don't think any school, whether at Concord, Co-Brown, wherever we may be, should not be the school of record unless they can immediately take all of our students. And I did read somewhere that for Co-Brown, it could be a transition, like if all our kids wanted to transfer to Co-Brown. I don't think that's going to happen, that all the kids would want to. But to me, if a school is a school of record, it means that they're guaranteeing that they're going to take our kids. So unless any school will guarantee taking all our students immediately, I don't think they should be considered the school of record. And also something that was said previous, I was surprised in the notes about the additional special ed things coming from Co-Brown. So again, I too would like to see what it is at Concord compared to with Co-Brown, because I will say, and I mean, I've been involved in the school a long time, I was really unaware that it is Deerfield's responsibility to find the one-on-one para for them and pay for it, in addition to the tuition rate already being more, also that we have to find and pay for speech, OT, PT, whatever extra services. So I guess I would, for my own interest, would like that comparison when possible from Concord. Like, so what is covered at Concord? Is there additional costs? Are we responsible for finding the paras? Are we responsible for services? So that was just something I'd like to see too. Thank you.
Who are you talking to?
Stacy Marchioni, Meeting House Hill Road. Thank you for providing the meeting notes on high schools. They're very helpful for people to stay up to date with what's going on and, you know, where things are at. So I really, really appreciate that, kind of having that information so we can kind of be kept apprised of where things stand and what you're finding as you're talking to these schools. I have Hooksett has 9 high school options. Hooksett does not have a high school. They have 9 high schools available for their students to choose from. 3 high schools in the Manchester School District, Bow, Goffstown, Londonderry, Pembroke, Pinkerton. Yeah, so 9 schools. There have been people who've expressed concern about kids not getting into their school of choice in Deerfield. If we have choices, then that perhaps that would argue for just providing one school. But I would proffer that the more schools that you offer, the less likely this is to happen. So if you offer 3, 4, 5 school options for kids, you're going to see them spread out more. You're less likely to end up with having to do a lottery for a popular school like Co-Brown, which is everyone's #1 choice, right? So if you made Concord High School the school of record, and you also have Co-Brown, you have Co-Brown being the #1 requested school by parents for many, many years now. If somehow they limited the number of students that were allowed to get in, you might end up in a lottery situation, which is something that everyone wanted to avoid. I would recommend that Co-Brown be the school of record, and that you have an MOU or some other kind of contract with Concord, given the popularity of Co-Brown in town, and how it clearly comes in as the #1 choice for parents again and again and again. I would encourage you to enter into MOUs with multiple schools for the reasons that I said. I would encourage you to, once again, to consider allowing top-off agreements. Hooksett does this. Hooksett's notes say that while attending the other MOU schools, which will charge a higher rate, must be offset by families paying the difference in rates. That's essentially a top-off agreement, the things that we've been talking about for years. Some of those schools accept the Pinkerton tuition rate, which is a fairly decent and low rate along the lines of what Concord is right now. But for any of those higher tuition schools, parents have to pay the difference, and I don't see that Hooksett has been sued yet. There are attorneys on both sides of this issue. I strongly encourage you to reconsider allowing that kind of language to help taxpayers pay for the schooling. I would also just agree with what Greg said, that these 2 documents on Co-Brown and Concord read very differently, as one that is very highly favored over the other. So I would maybe try to not show that kind of bias. Sure.
No, go ahead.
Kimberly Black, Meeting House Hill. I was just wondering if we were going to be able to do a Q&A after the Valley Breslinger's presentation, or if that was just a presentation today. Then I'll save those comments for the end. I just want to echo the same concerns that have been stated kind of about the document. I know you guys brought them forward so that we had the information that we've been asking you for and what you're trying to show. But I do think when there's information that's missing in the Concord document, because a lot of us already know a lot of the information about special ed stuff, but then it questions the Co-Brown side, it leaves a very gray area for everybody to try and read through the line. So if we could just do some clarifying notes on the fact that we do pay special ed expenses above the Concord tuition and kind of do some of those comparisons for the public. I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Harold Rhodes. This evening, my address is the Conservation Commission. I'm going to read a letter that the Conservation Commission sent to the school board today. Dear school board members, on May 18th, the Deerfield Conservation Commission sent you comments relative to the caption project, which is the parking lot paving project, making several recommendations which would, if incorporated into the existing plans, bring that plan into compliance with the terms of the relevant 2014 warrant article. We note that the bid document sent out under the request for proposals dated May 22nd, 2023 did not include the DCC, Deerfield Conservation Commission recommendations. The 2014 article warrant article calls for this paving project plan to be, quote, be developed in consultation with the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, end quote. It is doubtful that by this language, the legislative body intended that the school board would ignore or disregard the input offered by the DCC, particularly when incorporating the recommendations would not, in the grand scope of things, add any significant delay or cost to the project. We hope that the school board will take the necessary steps to incorporate the Conservation Commission recommendations into the paving project plan, implementing in its practices what it so ably preaches in its classrooms, and thereby be in compliance with the terms of the 2014 warrant article. Best regards, Sarita Fry, Deerfield Conservation Commission Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Okay. Agenda review. So we have the Valley Brensinger architects presentation. I think that will not be a Q&A unless people feel differently. Will likely be board can ask questions and then people are welcome to make public comments after. We also are reviewing the paving bids. Then we have drop off and pickup, fiscal year update, and then I did want to add, I know Ellen was not at the meeting last week, so I wanted to give her an opportunity to share anything else as Danielle had the opportunity to about her high school, the high school meetings. So I'm gonna add that as E. Do we need a non-public?
I don't think so.
Okay. And then nominations, public comments, and adjournment. Okay, so we will move forward with the architect's presentation, if you would like to join us. Now, we'll introduce ourselves. There's a lot of new of us, so we are new faces to you, though I was there, you're just not up here. So nice to see you again. I'm Kendra Cohen. I'm the new chair of the board.
I'm Danielle Palmer. Ellen O'Donnell. Hello.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm Jay Doherty. I'm one of the architects at LaValle Brensinger Architects, and I worked on the project, as many people saw my face back. I think we were 2 years ago, and we worked for a full year. With me is Lance Whitehead. I also worked alongside Jay and several others throughout that project. Looking forward to kind of trying to do a brief presentation tonight. Yeah, so we took a whole year's worth of information and tried to condense it to 10 minutes. So we have a lot we're going to go through. So Kristen, get ready to click that slides pretty quick. But we're happy to go back and talk about anything more in detail. So this is what we'd like to talk about today. just a quick understanding of the issues and needs that we went through with the reports. We looked at an engineering study. We had a full team of engineers go through the building, go through the ceilings, go through every piece of this building to understand mechanical, plumbing, electrical, all the systems, including architecture, building envelope, roofs, the whole thing. We did staff surveys to understand with the staff, how they use the space, what they see for deficiencies. We did leadership visioning, where we understood what the goals and the big picture for the school wants to be. We did stakeholder meetings where we talked to people to understand how the building's being used, and we also did community meetings to understand the greater community of how we want to move forward. From that, we came up with a proposed solution, which we'll present, which was what went in front of the voters 2 years ago. And then after that, and we know that obviously didn't pass, we did an alternate design post-bond that we heard some comments, and we tried to react to try to help you maybe moving forward, and maybe that makes sense or not, but that's where we left it. And I think it's the last time we were here, so.
Great, and I'll just interject for anyone who wasn't at one of our last meetings where we talked about inviting you. The idea behind this is that 3 of us, the majority of the board unfortunately didn't go through the process the first time. A lot of us came to the deliberatives or various meetings that you presented at, but we didn't have a full understanding of the entire process. So we're trying to get sort of up to speed, what we need for an addition, and then sort of talking about the process, where do we go from here?
Perfect.
So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, and the great news is it was an in-depth process, and we have a really good understanding of current issues in the building.
Excellent.
And I think anything you do moving forward, whether it's a large bond project or whether it's a capital improvement as a district with an operating budget, you have the data now to be able to make those decisions.
Excellent. Great.
So just the needs and issues that, as Lance talked about the document. Just a quick overview. We looked at the existing conditions. We looked at your site, and we looked at grading. We looked at all those pieces to understand how your building's working and all the pieces that tie to that. Go to the next one, Chris. We did a quick summary, just a couple hundred page, it's probably 100-page report. This is kind of distilled down to the hot issues. Obviously, the hottest one on the list is your fire alarm, which you're dealing with right now. So that one will again get changed. So this is a living document. As you begin to upgrade things and improve things, that things will change on this.
Sorry, quick question. The other hot one is the structural systems. Can you give me an example of what you're talking about there?
Structural
No, hot
systems
goes
is
high.
90.
5 goes high. Structural systems.
Scored on a 0 to 100. If it's 100, it's brand new condition.
Oh,
So the
but
red-
fire alarm. I was looking at fire protection.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Yeah.
And I'm colorblind. Sorry, I'm
So,
okay.
so red and orange.
That's
is-
red.
If you're colorblind, very short lines are bad.
We also did a matrix to understand what space needs, looking at size of what the Department of Ed recommends for spaces such as your cafeteria, and really what the size should be. That's undersized. Other spaces like nurse and other smaller classroom spaces, when we look at the state standards compared to what your school is, when it was built, it was probably fine, but the state standards have changed. So we did a map to understand some of the deficiencies in your school based on that. So the first floor and then the second floor, very similar. One of the things to note, the state putting kindergarten and first graders on the second floor is not recommended and not what the state likes to see.
And that's for any, like the library,
Correct.
not
So-
just their classroom.
So your unified arts, your library, exactly, media center, your art classrooms are on the second.
In both state standards as well as the National Fire Protection Codes, the fire code does not allow people that age being on upper floor without a dedicated means of egress for them that they're not competing.
And that's obviously so little kids can make it down the stairs without bigger kids,
Tranquilly,
Yeah.
yes.
Also deficiencies, you also have portables outside. And then when we looked at the space needs and demographics, there seemed to be a few classrooms missing. And those were some unified art spaces that we noticed. And also kindergarten space, based on the enrollment at the time we did the study, was needed. So there are some additional spaces. When we quickly looked at this was just to fix the items that we were talking about. Nothing new, nothing added. To fix the current repairs were about 12.6 million. Other project costs, which ties into all that, was about 5.1. And then there was an escalation of figuring to do that over a couple of years to make that happen. We were estimating rough order of magnitude about $20 million to fix just the needs of what we found with that report.
With the roof, with the work we've been doing, that number is now coming down, right? Because.
Correct. We haven't updated this. This is just where we're snapshot where we were. So you guys have already ticked some things off that list, so those numbers would change, but correct. And again, this is what we, based on that number, the mechanical systems, the building envelope, the interior finishes, the casework, but it's not talking about site improvement. It's not talking about any kind of growth, the modular classrooms. It's not talking about, the dealing with the portables or any of that stuff. So it was just to fix what you had. We also had stakeholder engagement meetings, which we had a couple here. The next one, Kristen. Some of the highlights here, and I think you're dealing with some of these right now. The parking lot, obviously an issue out there. Power in classrooms, the restrooms, the cafeteria being overcrowded and just very loud. Outside learning spaces can be improved, and then shared common spaces, especially as we think of middle school and we're trying to do community spaces for those students to be able to interact and learn.
The staff had a lot of feedback for us. We tried to distill it down to their top 5. We're able to get to their top 6, which I think is pretty good. But there's lots of feedback that staff gave through both workshops, meetings, and surveys that they filled out.
Yeah, again, super distilled. And then we also talked some community feedback, and just some of the things we heard. We heard that AC mechanical in the classroom, especially on the swing times, is very important. Community use space, being able to have spaces that the community can use on nights and weekends and vacation. And at that time, we heard that it's time to do something. What that something is wasn't completely understood, but it was time to do something at that time.
So we did a whole visioning process, and we created lots of kind of top 10 items of where does the school want to be in 10 years. It was a good opportunity that if we're going to build a building, why don't we step back and say, what are our goals? Who are we? And what do we believe in? That visioning process, I'm not going to go through tonight. It was lengthy, and it came out with a lot of great realizations. We essentially boiled it down to a community-based philosophy, trying to create critical thinkers with lots of definitions of success, which really fed into the building design being very state-of-the-art, technology-rich, but also flexible, and then the kind of the given safe, code-compliant, accessible, and sustainable.
So that took us to the proposed solution, which is what was presented to the voters. So there's kind of 3 parts to it here. There's the existing school renovation, which your big box there in the center. There was a new classroom wing, which was primarily geared to your middle school age students with some community space in that, and then some of your specialized programs in that space. And then an add to that project, which is a larger gym and community space, which would be that kind of purple box at the bottom there. Some of the things dealing with, we wanted to minimize the wetland impacts. We wanted to look at drop-offs and fire lanes, also utilizing outdoor classrooms, paving that parking area, and then leach field expansion, new pump house, and all those pieces that tied into the site pieces there. So as we look at the building, renovating the building, there's some areas which would have some heavier renovation, which is about 14,000 square feet, and some later renovation where we do some minor stuff in the building, just replacing some of the things we noted in the report, which would be about 57,500 square feet. And then the addition was about 44,500 square feet. So totaling 116,000 square feet. As you can see, here's the design. It's a multi-level design with, on the right-hand side, there'd be a new wing coming off that. With on the first floor, we'd have some preschool and some kindergarten spaces. And in the back of the school, off the cafeteria, we'd expand the cafeteria. And then a community area on the left-hand side, as you see there. The upstairs, as I talked about, the middle school concept really ties into the right-hand side on that addition. That's that multi-story addition that happens there. And then renovations throughout the school to try to create some grade level homes. As you can kind of see, we've carved out the hallways to create these grade level zones so that intervention and pull-out space could happen for the students in those spaces.
You see here, we relocated any space that would be accessed by kindergarten or preschool down to the first floor. So library moves down and this area gets renovated to classroom uses and breakout space that complies with both the state and the NFPA code requirements.
A lot of numbers here, but this was just kind of a breakdown of a proposed solution versus your existing and with the changes that happened in there. So I have to go through all of that right now, but there's a lot of information there. So, to understand what, this is kind of a graphic breakdown of what we just said there. The existing building makes 62% of this project. Some additional classroom spaces by moving the portables back into a real part of a school and some additional classrooms. Right sizing the kindergarten, about 21% of this project. Special ed intervention and all those types of spaces is 7%. The common spaces that we were talking about where students have space to interact, to work together in small groups, that common space is about 6%. And then support spaces, additional toilets and mechanical space and storage was about 4% on top of that. Here's some views of what that looked like. So obviously you see your existing building on the kind of the center or the just left of center there. And then there would be a new community space that would also be a student presentation area as the kind of the circle piece or the knuckle. And then on the right-hand side would be the kindergarten lower level spaces on the lower level, and then the middle school spaces above. It's another view of that looking straight on at that wing. And here's the entry, and on the left side would be that community gym / community space that could be used by the community meetings. Just one more view of that knuckle piece. This is inside that knuckle piece, so a presentation area that the community could use and students could use to practice their presentation skills and also be able to meet, very flexible, that it can be moved around and used for multiple things throughout the school day. This was the rough timeline we talked about before, just understanding that after the bond vote passed, there was a design time, then bid, and then construction. So it was kind of an extended time period there. This was a little bit of a logistics of just how the pieces would happen so that we could keep kids safe throughout the whole project by doing some additions and then mobilizing and moving pieces around before we worked on renovations. So that seemed to work very well when we looked at that. But overall, it was about a $45.5 million project. The new construction and the renovated space, we also added some escalation and contingency for that time, and then some soft costs that tie into that, which are permitting and engineering fees and all the pieces that go into those. After that didn't pass, we did a quick alternate design. This would just take me a minute to explain. It was based on some feedback from working with the school board. How could we pare this back? Looking at this project a little different. If you look at the diagram in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the gray previous space that we were thinking about. And then this is kind of a much simpler pared back version of just adding some classroom space, as you can see on the left-hand side, kind of one wing that comes off, and some minor renovations inside just to make your building code compliant inside. That would also have a second floor, which again, we have some of those classrooms for the middle school on this second floor and a common space for them. Very limited renovation interior. As you noticed last time, we were carving out to create some a lot of shared spaces and breakout spaces in the center of the school where your school currently is. This plan does not do that. It just does more of an addition. The next slide will kind of, I'm not going to go through all these, but there were definitely some things that were lost from the original plan to this plan, so it's not an apples to apples. Family consumer science, shop was lost. Bubble classrooms for grades was removed. Those breakout spaces were reduced. That large community space was reduced. the cafeteria was reduced, the second gym, just on and so on and so forth. There were a lot of things that were taken out to make that plan smaller. We do a quick comparison from the original plan to this alternate plan or this new proposal. It was about a 40% space reduction in new construction. If we look at heavy renovation, it's about, it's probably a third or a quarter of what it was, probably a third. And then light renovation, which is an even lighter renovation to a much simpler piece that we showed before.
To be clear, it's not just a space reduction, it's also some of those early visioning and bullet points of things we wanted to accomplish. It reduces scope and impact. So I don't want anyone looking at it as a community of like, why wouldn't we build a building that's 40% smaller if it accomplishes the same thing? It doesn't. It has less education space. It does not offer hands-on learning environments. It doesn't offer family consumer environments. Middle school it doesn't offer community space. This essentially is, if we pared this project back, how far could we go as a first phase? And I think eventually you'd be looking at your community to create a second phase to continue working on things.
That is a good point, Lance. As you saw in the diagram we're adding on the left side, once the portables get removed, it does give you an option to do something on the right side in the future as you start to lay something out as a future plan.
But this would allow you to eliminate portables,
Yeah.
right? And it would still fix the items that we know are due for failure in the existing building.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, there was a lot in a little bit of time.
And it wasn't so much a question as I think another key thing that I remember from the last process was that an element of the bigger expansion that I think was important, and the reason the heavy renovation was changed is that to do the heavy renovation, we can't do it in the summer. We have to put the kids somewhere and educate them while we're doing the heavy renovation. And so that's what that initial plan allowed us to do, that this other one doesn't really make possible as much. And so that's where we're losing a lot of the heavy renovation. Those big concerns with this current building, we can't get at a lot of them because the kids are in here. We can't put them anywhere else while we're working on it.
I think the plan would be feasible. It'd probably be more. So we still have an addition and we can move, the size of the addition is the amount of students that move into that space, right? The first plan, we were taking entire half floor plates at a time for the contractor to say, this is construction zone, partitioning it off. This plan, because you have a smaller addition, would just mean smaller bites inside the building of what you can accomplish. And in the construction world, time is money. So you're paying, $40,000, $50,000 a month to run a construction project. And if you add months, or if you add a year, because you've got a longer phasing plan, that equates to significant dollars.
So, okay, so I have these. So let's say, this is theoretical, but let's say we have some other requests or suggestions. What do we do? So like we propose them, you draft up something, and then we have to vote on something, I assume. How do we figure out like how much this is going to ballpark cost so that we can know what we are proposing?
Very, very good question. So when you say ballpark, I like you using that word because a lot of people will say, how much is this going to cost? An estimate. An estimate is going to come from a contractor or someone who's going to build it. We brought Bonnet Page and Stone on board last time. They helped us through the process. They're a construction manager who would manage the whole construction process for us. And they also helped us because they have real time. They can talk to subs and they can talk to, people that are actually building it. So they can get us real numbers. And that's what that number that we showed you was, a real true number.
And that's based on like the cost of like, I don't know, whatever you're putting in, and not like cost per square foot, for
Correct.
instance.
And we would do more of a cost per square foot because we don't have access to all those builders, all those
Right.
masons. We don't just have access to those. So we would use a historic number of recent projects we built that are similar.
Mhm.
And then so we'd use that, and then we'd use what the industry is using for escalation. So we would add to that based on that.
If you wanted to, just theoretically, if you wanted to put a warrant article for this coming March, before, really by September, you would probably want to have your dollars set, your real dollars, not order of magnitude, the detailed numbers. So that you could use October, November, December, I mean, that time frame to educate voters about the merits of the project and give them time to weigh in and make any adjustments you need to make by the end of the year. So kind of building that schedule, in order to get there, we would want to use August and September to make any sign refinements. To do that, you would re-engage our firm to make updates and work with you as you see fit. And then re-engage either the same construction manager that you hired previously or re-engage a new construction manager. I would think you use the same one, given that you went through a selection process to arrive at them, and essentially update everything. I think a realistic timeline would be trying to get decisions made in the by the end of September, to give adequate time for a community to be able to weigh in.
Is there anything from the state funding side that would either recommend that schedule or next year, the following year, as being better? Or should we not hope on any state funding anyway?
Well, it's interesting. We're working with the state right now. We're helping the state is going through a revamp of their state aid, the way that we were applying for it last time versus the way it's moving towards. So we've been in several meetings with the state, just working through that process.
Yeah, so for those of you know, where House Bill 452 passed and will now be taking effect, what that House bill does is it modifies the state process and how they essentially dole out money. It also modifies the entire, the ED 300, which is all the regulations associated with schools, including classroom sizes and a lot of what you draw from as part of that process. It looks like within that state process, the process from this last biennium for the state, anybody who votes in 24, the only people eligible for state funding are people who are already on that list. So that would be Colebrook and Concord, and then they're pretty much out of money. They have $50 million to hand out. They've already encumbered 30 of it. They have roughly 20 or a little less to hand out, and the next two projects on the list will wipe that out. So there will be no possibility for state aid for anybody voting, for you guys voting in March of 24. The new process, the way it works is the state will encumber their money first, then you will apply and they'll dole it out. So March of 25, also likely off the table for you to receive any state aid. Your first opportunity for state aid would be an application in April of 24 and a vote April of 25 and a vote in March of 26, at least the way that program is proposed. Long and short is you would have to wait significantly for the possibility of state aid, not knowing how you are going to stack up competing for the same dollars. This last biennium, the state was able to fund only 4 projects. And if one of those projects had been at the top, they'd have only funded 1, because 50 million doesn't go that far when you have large projects like Concord asking for 70.
With that said, though, they're still working out the rules and how this all applies. So this is early. This isn't like cast in stone yet. They're still trying to figure out how this all plays.
But that wouldn't change the timeline you just talked about, or that might change the timeline?
There's lots of things in play. The timeline is part of the rule making that's going on right now. But what the House bill does dictate is revising it so that the state would encumber funds first and then dole out after. The final dates, though, whether it's you're applying in April and then finding out you're getting funded by November, or whether they change by months, would be different. My best educated guess is that you will not be able to get state aid unless you vote in March of 26 or later. And even then, I think it will be an uphill battle to get state aid.
I recall there being some sort of algorithm that made Deerfield less likely than other districts to get aid. Is that still in effect?
Yes, they're likely keeping the same point system, although they have the opportunity through the House bill to modify the point system. The point system is actually a pretty good system that works well for the score. we had shared in previous meetings, the point system. Some of the points, Deerfield won't do as well as other communities, like percentage of students on, on free and reduced lunch. There are communities you'll compete against that have much higher. The biggest point system, big point category is safety issues. And the safety issues, I think you guys have done a great job addressing. Your primary safety issue is students, younger students on an upper floor. It's hard to say because every year the state is going to have people reapply and you'll be who submitted that year and how'd you fare. It's a lot different competing against Rochester and Concord than who goes to the next biennium. So.
Do you guys have any questions?
I was just curious, I'm sorry, I'm new to this, but why did you end up reducing it? Or I'm just curious, why did you have the addition on the right and not on the left? Like you had that, and it's probably cheaper, but I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, so in the phasing, one of the things was we had to, in the summer, move the portables so that we could build that addition, and then
Right.
students could use those portables, and then we.
So it's mainly because the portables are there and they can use it while
Yep,
it's
so
going on. Okay,
phasing wise, it saved one step.
yeah, okay.
There might have been, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of it is the space we have to move in those directions. I think there's not as much space available over there because of that wetland.
Right,
And so if down the road we do grow, that's one of the big questions is how much are we growing or not?
right.
And if we do need
Then
more
we have that
space,
area
then there's
there.
still more room, like you mentioned, maybe 10 years or whatever, maybe we could go that way.
Based on your going through the whole process, I know there was a lot that was cut out, but do you think that there's any big losses that we should be looking at trying to incorporate? This is a question for you too.
I mean, starting from second proposal here.
Yeah.
What bigger things would I put back into that?
You may not have an opinion, but
I think that the big question is you guys more than us. I mean,
Yeah.
I think all of the priorities highlighted by staff are significant. I think the biggest one this board would want to struggle with is middle school curriculum. Is it going to involve hands-on learning, cooking, life skills, those types of things. And then the second one, which I know is separate from curriculum, is community use space. You want to incorporate community use space. I know the board we worked with debated heavily on that community center on the left.
Mhm.
The people that did show up for community meetings all said, yes, you need to build in community assets. Obviously, the voting turnout felt differently. So.
Right, maybe a way to look at this is, for example, if we don't do the heavy renovation of this building, can we get at the electrical improvements and all of the other improvements that need to happen in some other way, right? It's gonna be light renovation. If we can't move the kids very effectively, then what are the bigger needs that we do need to accomplish, and can we get those addressed a different way?
is that something you guys would be able to help with? Like, if we're saying we need to upgrade electrical or whatever sort of capital improvement projects potentially, would you be able to identify what we could do without having to move kids? And if there's like a good schedule that we could come up with in terms of like putting money in the operating budget for those, and then also separately in addition.
Yeah, we've worked with districts in the past to develop a capital improvement plan that you can check things off and try to work your way through it. We can help you with the phasing of that too. So
Potentially a board workshop where we could essentially prioritize everything and say it is really, for every district, it's really difficult to prioritize things in so many different categories. What's more important, clean, fresh air or having electrical outlets that you can plug into? Well, I mean, there aren't really apples to apples, it's apples to carburetors, and you just have to figure out what would our community support and what do we think are going to have the biggest impact on students.
Do you have any questions?
Not right now, I don't think. We'll be able to get a copy of this presentation, right?
sure, yeah, definitely. I'll send it to Patty.
Thank you.
I'd like to look at it slower.
Yeah. Great. Thank you guys
Thank
so
you
much
for your
for
time.
coming.
Thank you so much.
Looking forward to it.
Next,
Next steps. Great question. What do you think? Should we plan a board workshop where we are brainstorming?
I think that'd be a great idea.
board, subcommittee like we did last time. And had members involved
Yeah, I was
last
gonna
time.
say, it'd be nice to have community members involved instead of just the board.
It might make sense to have a board workshop to sort of regroup and figure out where you want to go. You know, you had a committee, which was great, but I think that was during the process of, got a whole lot of work
Figuring out.
already done. So I think you need to figure out what your next steps are, and then from that, okay, do we need a committee? What would the charge be? Who do we need to involve? Are we gonna, the timeline is really important. I don't know that I heard from the board that you were interested in moving forward with anything on this warrant coming up in March, with the contract, and you have a lot to take on. I can't imagine that we'd be ready that soon, so I don't think you have to go full speed ahead, but certainly a workshop to brainstorm how you want to approach the task.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. I think we need to engage the community, but in a different way than we did last go around. It's less about what spaces we need or brainstorming ideas and like how can we get this done and how can we figure this out?
I think the committee, there was a lot of behind the scenes work that needed to be done and is done. But I think keeping all of the board members involved from this point on is better than sending people off and then trying to bring back and relay that information and what went on at the meeting and just having it more open.
Yeah,
And choosing when you want a Q&A or you want the public and identifying people that you want to invite to come in and speak, whatever that looks like.
Okay. Yeah,
Could we, maybe ask for something like if, and do we think that next March, not this March, next March, is a reasonable time that we want to set for a goal for ourselves? And if that's the case, then how do we work back and set some points for us to try to hit over the next year and a half or whatever to get there? What needs to be accomplished? Maybe for our next, whatever this work session is going to be, that would be a place to maybe look at something like where are we and what has to happen and start to schedule out.
Right.
Because you gotta think a year and a half in advance before this comes together.
Yes.
There's lots to do.
a lot to do. I know that we will be quite busy with high school things the next few meetings. But I don't want to sort of lose any steam on this. I think it is a very important thing for our students, for the community to know that we're still engaged with this. Do we want to use one of our work session board meetings as a workshop for this? Or do we want to schedule something separate?
And those starting in October, gonna start to be budget, follow the budget work.
Right.
But there's some time after that. Yeah.
Maybe we
Can we
can,
make one a separate time from the normal school board?
I think we may have to, because I think high school will take up a good chunk of August and September.
I think a decision you need to make too is that, if we're our friends from LBA are still here, is that the intention is to re-engage and to come up with, would you want them to be part of the workshop to help us figure out what's next and what needs to happen to formulate some kind of a plan for them to work with us to proceed and just kind of make that decision first.
I personally would love to re-engage with them and get the process going that way, because I personally have no architect background, and things that I think might work may just be a very quick no.
To what extent do we want more detailed feedback from the community than what we have? And to what extent we want to have them come in sooner, but then not have exactly a crystal clear plan of what we're asking if we want to get more community input. And so is that where we start, or do we want to have some piece of information from the meeting to give to the community?
I almost wonder if it'd be good to start with catching them up a little bit on what's been done, what we've crossed off, the company architects. So that they can kind of knock some of that stuff off of their original list, so that they can get a better understanding of what the cost may possibly look like even, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously I want community input, but I think we have to have some reference for them, like,
to give you input about it.
right, like if it's just like, we need a new classrooms, like, yes, totally agree. But like, I think having some sort of working draft of like, this is our first stab at trying to address the space needs.
Like the
What do you
bare bones or-
think? And we could possibly have a ballpark square foot number, but potentially not, but I wouldn't want to go through this whole process and then have people like, we need a dedicated new nursing office for the middle school or something, like I'd rather hear that up front before we.
I don't know that I'm hearing the need for like a 3-hour work session of the maybe we ask if they can come in and do an updated visit, or just to sort of look at some of the changes, or meet with Chris, is that we can get at some of what we've done in the last couple of years, and update.
Yeah,
Then maybe it's another like an hour during the meeting, or half an hour, we can look at this, we can have our own, formulate our own ideas, and then come back and say, can we update it this way?
I do think personally, moving forward with a capital improvement project or timeline versus an addition and having those sort of be separate
Yeah, I agree.
to the extent that they can be is the way to go.
Yeah.
Because if there are things that we can do in a phased approach via warrant articles or whatever, I think we should try. And then I think having the addition chunk as one project and one warrant article.
So the details for this conversation, would they fit into a regular meeting, or do we need a separate workshop meeting? Recognizing there's gonna have to be work done outside of meetings to bring the information we need.
I think initially it can be, I think initially it can be done in the meeting, I would think. And then that can determine if we need a longer one separate.
So if we all looked over what they have and they came up with a prioritizing what we think the priorities are, what things should we get done, capital plan, leave the addition alone at this point, and look at that other stuff, and then we could talk about it at the meeting. See who's got what and decide what we think.
I think that's fair. I think this is our first night of even looking at this.
Yeah.
So I think everyone should review it. And maybe at our next meeting, we can talk about what we should do as a plan. Do we have a big workshop? How do we start engaging people? When do we start engaging community members, et cetera?
Well, I would welcome community members to send us an
Absolutely.
email
Yeah.
about what they think priorities are as well, so that we could take that into consideration when we do that. So I would say we can, we should get feedback right away.
Our next meeting is mid-July.
We had that.
19th. We talked about maybe hopefully having high school information to review at that point.
So obviously, like, we have not had any real input. This plan was drafted by the architects. We have not had input in it as this board, at least. I do think it's at least a good place to start of, putting this out saying, what do you think to people? So we could post it on Facebook or whatever and let people.
And I think the list of things that need to be done.
Right.
Yeah.
and let people know that like at our July meeting, we're gonna be talking about this again.
I think it's difficult to put something out without a cost attached to it,
Yeah,
because
it is, yeah.
last time people were pretty jazzed up about things until a $45.8 million price tag came with it.
Yeah.
You know, if,
Yeah.
I don't know enough about this, is that a $20 million project? Is it a $30 million project? And that may change people's minds and opinions. If you're interested in asking for a rough, like they just talked about, a rough, not an exact number, but a square foot ballpark. Have a number attached to that, because I don't think the general layperson is gonna have any idea what that would cost.
I agree, except for that I feel like we may propose in our next meeting, like I would personally like to see the cafeteria get bigger, right?
Before
So
you put the cost to it, decide.
I feel like we need
Yeah.
one meeting where we can sort of talk about it
Mhm.
and brainstorm before we're like throwing a price out. Like at least one meeting,
Yeah.
maybe just one.
That makes sense. I was thinking about the cafeteria myself. I'm
Right.
sure you guys were thinking about the cafeteria.
Right,
It's a
so
huge
like there
issue.
are things that like I think it's a good first stab, but like there are things that I will propose changing.
Okay. That makes sense.
And that I would like to see before we start throwing numbers out.
So July 19th.
Okay, so July 19th.
July 19th,
And we all need to come in with a list of what we think is important. We'll list the emails if we get those, and we can discuss that.
And that is just the board.
Yes.
Board workshop.
board workshop, obviously, the public is welcome to submit
sure.
comments in advance, at public comments, et cetera. And then we will probably plan for a larger brainstorming workshop, et cetera, with the public
And a follow meeting with all.
and a follow-up meeting, yes. Yeah, I don't think they need to. Okay. Anyone have anything else on the architect presentation? Thank you for arranging that, Terry. Okay. Paving is. Hi,
Good evening.
Chris,
Hi,
how are you?
how's everybody? Good, well, doing well, thank you. Yep, we received 3 bids for the paving project. I think you guys have the spreadsheet in front of you. One came in, I'm just gonna give, the high number of 236,000. Second one came in at, 4 bids actually, 241,000. Next one was, we'll call that 255,000. And then the last bid came in at 475,000. Okay, we're not putting forward the lowest bid on the following, not technicalities, but failure to follow the scope of works, what was needed for submitting. Galloway was the lowest bid, but he called out for exclusions that he would not take into consideration or take it upon himself to just take care of those issues. And he also called for a different top coat, which he called out for crushed asphalt, and it was clearly stated in the bid documents, either a 6-inch coarse stone or a fine crushed stone. So that's why we are not putting forward Galloway Trucking. We are putting forward tonight Connie Septic Surface. I think they're also called CSSI, well-known company in New Hampshire, also recommended by the engineer for that project. So I'm looking, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Oh, you're saying that's the one that you're.
Yes, CSSI for $241,255. That number does not include any light pole work. That is just strict paving.
And the light pole, we've talked about this before, but when would we be looking to do that?
The light pole would probably, I would try to shoot for the next July meeting.
Okay.
I'm gonna present tonight the manufacturer that I'd like to go with the light pole, what the parking lot is gonna be looking like with those lights.
Mhm.
And then we would go out to bid for the actual individual light poles. I've got to, I'm working with New Hampshire Co-op to get a small rebate on each individual pole. So to be able to qualify for the rebate, I need to use specific suppliers for those poles. So we would be putting out to bid the light poles, the excavation work. The piers are gonna come in under $5,000, so that does not need to go out to bid. That would go with the manufacturer, would be Phoenix Precast in Concord. And then we would buy, to make it cheaper on our end, we would buy all of the supplies through the dealer that we award for the light poles. And then we would just need an electrical contractor to come in, they're 20-foot poles, which would be no problem, to run the wire connection, and we have lights in the parking lot. If you look up at the screen, you can see I took the, oh, actually, can we approve?
Let's do that.
Sorry, I'm
first.
jumping on. Can I have approval for putting forward Connie's septic system for the contractor of choice for the paving project?
I'll move to nominate Connie Septic Services for the paving project.
Second. Discussion.
Yes. Sorry, you were in the middle of a thought. I thought you were about to say something before.
I was, right after we get done that one. So we're moving forward with Connie's.
There's a motion, but
Oh,
no.
the motion's pending.
Yeah, so I guess my question then before we make the decision is, the funding is gonna come from the trust fund, but that doesn't cover 241.
Correct.
255.
Yes,
Mhm.
you would need to use funds from another trust fund in addition to what you have in the paving fund.
And there's no chance this is going to be, we can't use this year's operational budget. That's coming. Because we're not gonna have this finalized until after July 1st.
Correct.
So feasibly, we could pay the excess out of another trust fund, or if there is excess next year. Correct. Of the operating budget.
We're not gonna do that.
Well,
Correct.
yeah, so you would pay for the services and then we would reimburse from the paving. And then the remainder, you could just leave it in the budget and then toward the end of next year decide, are we just gonna leave it there or are we gonna withdraw from one of our other trust funds?
Okay, so right off the bat, this can be paid from the budget starting July 1st.
It's a separate line, yeah.
And right, but it's a default budget, so that's putting us suddenly, like, before the year starts, $250,000 hole.
Well, you would pull immediately the paving
From the
funds,
trust fund.
yes.
With a difference there of 60,000, because the.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's not too big a hit on the operating budget. We could then also pull more from a different trust fund if we wanted to cover the
Yes.
rest of that.
Yeah, so I don't think there would be a situation where we're shooting ourselves in the foot with the operating budget, because we do have other funds in other trust funds that we could use for paving. In terms of the public comment regarding the Conservation Commission, if people had questions about that. So we, as you know, invited the Conservation Commission to come to our meeting on May 17th when the town engineer was here. The plans were created by the town engineer with the specific duty to use best environmental practices as his charge when creating the plan. We obviously invited the planning board. The planning board sent the chair, Pete Chevelhout, to come, and he had offered a lot of questions and suggestions. Ultimately was fine signing off on the project. We did receive some comments the next day on the 18th from a member of the Conservation Committee, which were forwarded to the engineer for review. I will say the comments that we received, it's slightly unclear whether these were the formal recommendations of the Conservation Commission. They were from a citizen in town named Spencer Tate, who is not on the Conservation Commission. And they were they seemed to be his informal sort of musings on the topic. It starts off by saying a couple minor items with my brief and certainly not comprehensive review of the plans. I think the plans were created using best environmental practices. These were certainly suggestions that were not incorporated. But I don't think that we are missing sort of any environmental regulations or anything like that in our paving project.
And we're meeting, in order to use the trust funds that we're talking about, we have to meet the terms in the article.
Correct.
And we do that.
Yes. Does anyone have any other comments or questions before we vote on the awarding the bid?
Is the paving part, is that including the swale and the?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm glad you said that because that was my question. Okay, thanks.
All right. If there's no further discussion, we will vote. All in favor of awarding the bid?
Aye.
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 Got
Very
it.
good.
What else is on your list?
What else is on my list? Fire alarm upgrades, the last phase of them are starting today. So that should be done by the end of this summer, ready for the school year. That photo up there is actually a blueprint of what the parking lot's gonna look like. And then the colored circles are the foot candles of the lights that we'll be installing. The blue is central as it goes out, I think red, and then the green. So we do have one dark area towards the back where it's gonna be the drive-through lane come next school year. But I think with the lights that we're proposing, the lights we're proposing is a great improvement from what we had out there. So I don't think you're gonna be uncomfortable walking out to the parking lot at any time. They'll also have 120 receptacles at the bottom. So if we have any activities out in the parking field, there's power there. They'll also be on a dimmer switch, which will start out at 100%. And we can say, okay, stay on for a half an hour and then dim down, save electricity. If they're activated like a spotlight, they'll go back up to 100%. So kind of added safety for the building if anybody's driving through at night. The next one is my SAFE grant. The second of the third. Working with a American window film. I have some samples for you. There's two here that are the clear ones. And then two here are the dark ones. The dark ones will be going on at the main entrance, making it harder to see into the building. The clear ones will be going on the actual classroom windows around the lower floor. And the clear ones will also be going on these windows here and all the little horizontal or rectangular windows in the classrooms. So it's the money is there. It's the Homeland Security grant. Just want to let you guys know and the blessing to move forward with that.
Do you need a motion? Does he need a motion for us to move
No,
forward?
we have
Okay.
the funding. I think we're just trying to keep you apprised of what the plan is in case you had any concerns.
No, I think that's fine. If anyone has any questions.
My last one, or not my last one, but my next one is door replacement. We're not actually going to replace any of the doors or door frames. I met with a contractor last week and he felt that the doors were in great shape. We are just going to do a hardware upgrade on a lot of the doors. just want to let you guys know, we won't have a meeting for that, so I won't be able to present you the price, but again, it's grant funded, so the money is there.
Great.
Okay, great. The roof has started.
I saw flags.
Yes.
When I
yes.
drove it.
Warning flags. So we've got 20 feet wide going on today. They're starting over the gym and work out towards the curbs on the exterior building. So it's going to be great not having any more leaks in the building. Looking forward to it. My next one is the siding, the vinyl siding that we're replacing also in conjunction with the paving project. The prices are all very, very close. A matter of,
Do you need it? I have it.
do you have it? Actually, where is it? I misplaced it with all my junk. Thank you, Kristen.
Of course.
I'd like to make the recommendation of presenting, awarding the bid to A1 siding.
Wait, can you remind me what this project is?
This is for the gabled ends.
Oh, it's for the
on-
roof.
Yeah,
Oh,
yes, it's
You
not
said
part of the
paving
roof.
project, so I was confused.
It's just because we're going to all the work of replacing
Yeah.
the rubber. There's just layers of stuff on there. So it's just to replace and make it outdated, like new, actually, once we're done with it. So I'd like to present, or like to make the recommendation of A1 siding for that project at $12,855.
Does anyone want to make that motion?
I'll nominate A1 side to award the vinyl siding.
Second. Any discussion?
Have money.
Well,
Chris, was this planned out of one of the trust fund purchases?
Yes,
Talked about it
I
last time.
don't remember which one, but it was,
thought
was
talked
it
about
just the general maintenance trust fund?
I can't remember. This-
was
I
the
know-
same as the roofing
Yeah,
project.
I think so, yeah.
in general.
We talked about it at the
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
That's all I
Athletic
have.
fields is the
What?
last thing, the athletic field.
Yeah, grass growing on the athletic.
It's not good. Yeah, that's good. We want it.
Yes, we do want grass on the athletic field.
Perfect.
That's all I have.
That's all you're doing?
Yeah, you know,
Well.
the architect's still here. I'll knock some more stuff off there.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, now we are on to drop off and pickup.
All those who have enjoyed our current drop-off and pickup situation, we unfortunately have been told by the fire department that we cannot continue. So we are once again coming up with a new idea. This is going to, well, it all depends on the paving project. So now hopefully it'll be up and running and ready to go for the new school year. So we will have cars come in down the main road. I'll stand up. I wish I had a little laser pointer. So we're hoping to have cars come down the main road. Correct. So come around all the way around the building, all the way to the mounds over here. We're guesstimating around 40, 45 cars. We're not exactly sure. But doing it in 3 zones currently. So we'll do like a blue, yellow, and white zone, something like that, or blue, white, yellow.
Colors.
Colors.
Does that mean like kids will be dropped off?
Yeah, so we would have roughly, these kids from here to here would get off and use this entrance. Kids from here to here would get off, get out and use their entrance over here.
Yeah.
And then kids from here, pretty much right about here, would use the cafeteria entrance. Right now, this year, we were averaging about 150 cars a day. We do, I'm not gonna say it, but hopefully we'll have another bus next year. I'm not gonna say we are gonna have another bus, but that will hopefully eliminate maybe 20, 25 cars in the grand scheme of things. So it would maybe help us out a little bit. We're also hoping that by bringing the cars all the way around, it'll prevent traffic buildup on the main road. So that's our goal. Obviously, it'll be kind of a trial and error a little bit. Everyone who currently does all the pick up and drop off will be the same people out there, so we're all familiar with how it all operates. We've all become very good crossing guards and traffic controllers. So cars will, unfortunately, the tightest squeeze is gonna be right here. I will take that post, be in charge of there. This will essentially become like a cross, like kids will have to wait, cars will have to wait, so there'll be some, some growing pains with it. But,
Similar to when they're coming off the circle now in the morning going across.
Yes.
You guys have
yes,
people there to stop.
correct, yep. And then they'll exit out as in Chris's other map, so there will be a dedicated, roadway out. And we will most likely post another person out here,
Yeah,
just
so
for
they
the
make a
control.
left, yeah.
They'll make a left, and it's kind of a blind left with the trees there, so we'll probably post somebody there, maybe Heather or Greg with their outfits. And then buses can continue to use the front. So that's our plan.
We consider taking down some of the trees that are created in the blind spot?
Yeah, we will, we should probably trim back some of those trees. I'm not sure where our property begins and the others, but I'm sure we can figure that out.
And I think you were just sort of talking about this, but you're going to have some kids go right into the modulars, or are you gonna keep them away from the modulars until the traffic?
Well, it'll be like, so once the traffic stops, so any kids coming out the bus will have to wait in that doorway until the cars are stopped, then we'll have them come out, cross over while those cars come out, and we'll move each zone as we're ready to move each zone. So, the biggest thing that's gonna happen is cars will not be able to idle along this whole perimeter because of the intake. Yes. So it will be some really hot days and some really cold days for car rental parents. They'll keep some parents away until more like 215, 230 instead of 150. So, but in the past, when we used to do a drop off in the back, we had cones out here so the playgrounds could still be used. So we'll put that back into operation as well. So, and usually, typically, the first car that comes to pick up is usually the first person on a regular basis. So they get, they get to the habit of waiting here. So those should work out.
I assume at 150, you're not going to have somebody, an idling police person back there. So there's going to be signs on the outside of the building maybe, or how are you going to prevent?
Yes, I mean, we're gonna have to tell people. I will have no problem knocking on windows to tell people. I do that for cigarette smoking, so
Okay, so
I have no problem doing it for.
at 150, we are gonna have a no idling police?
Well, hopefully, one thing, we won't have cars pull up for pickup until probably preschool, not preschool, kindergarten has their recess until 2:15. So after 2:15, then we can remove these cones and have cars move up. So
They
it'll
just
be.
start,
But
they
they
start
can
on the
start
property.
there.
But they
Yeah,
start on
they
the
start
property
lining up.
around 1:15 to 2. But if they know they are sitting in a cold car, they might not come.
Have we ever done anything to try and encourage parents to not pick up their kids up? I mean.
When we had 7 buses, it
Well,
was a lot easier.
because it's just.
It's just
That's,
buses.
yeah, we needed to ask them to please help.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah, the
Okay.
buses.
I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Questions? We'll give it a go, and if we need to make adjustments as we go along, we'll be in communication through one call now and getting this information out on a regular basis.
Yeah, we'll probably do a video, and that's what we did that last time, we changed the
Mhm.
traffic pattern, we did a video for everybody. And
Cool.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, fiscal year update.
So, this comes with a little bit of hesitation from Amber because we're still finishing and we're still reconciling some of our liabilities, our health insurance, retirement, those are pretty costly invoices that are still being reconciled, but as of today, we're estimating 515. So that means your 300,000 in warrant articles would be funded, and then you would still have some to discuss for retention once the book's fully closed. You'll need to vote and decide whether you're gonna retain any of those funds.
But not right now.
That's just to give you a better idea of where we're at right now.
Okay, great. Ellen, since you were not at the last meeting, Danielle shared, I don't know if you've watched it, Danielle shared a brief overview of her visits, of your visits with Concord and Co. Brown, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to say anything else. You also created a document that you wanted us to look at, so we'll
Yep.
give you an opportunity to talk about that.
Yep, so the meeting notes, I just wanted to, based on a lot of the comments that were at the beginning of the meeting, I wanted to just explain a little bit about why they're so different. They're very different because Co-Brown, we walked in cold, and we were trying to find out if they would take all our kids, and if so, how much it would cost. And so a lot of those questions, and then asked the questions about making sure they would take all the kids and not get rid of them. That has to do with, in the past, they did pick and choose kids that they took. So they did not take all the kids. They very definitely, kids had to apply and they had to, and they picked and chose who they wanted. So we just want to make sure that wasn't going to happen. So that's kind of why we had a lot of those comments. As to the special ed, I think that was a great comment about pulling out the Concord costs, but the big difference is that Co-Brown, they only have case managers and paraprofessionals. They don't have anybody else in-house that does work. They don't have speech therapists, they don't have OTs, they don't have counselors, they don't have any of that kind of stuff. So if a student needs those resources, the district needs to find someone out of district, out like just go to an OT somewhere, a contracted service, which is more expensive than if they're in-house. Concord has those people in-house, so it's cheaper. But I think that would be really good to look at the cost, what are the costs that we spend and what would we be spending if we were at Co-Brown. So I think that was a great comment and we will look into that. But I just wanted people to know that, one, regardless of what they need for an IEP, you are paying $7,000 more for tuition. And that if they need a one-on-one, you have to pay for a one-on-one, and then you have to outsource any of the other stuff. So it is pretty expensive for special ed kids. Concord, on the other hand, this is a school that we have a relationship with for a long time. So the meeting obviously was very different. So the questions that we were asking weren't, we're familiar with a lot of the services that they have. So it wasn't like we had to find out a lot of their services. It was really more, the reason why we have these like distance academic excellence inside the school was they wanted to know, well, why do you think the Warren article wasn't approved? Why was the contract voted down? And we were saying based on the survey that there were three main reasons that we saw that people were voting for or choosing Co-Brown, and they were distance academic excellence and size of school. And so we talked about that, and so that's why I put it in the minutes, and that's why it's the way it is. So I understand, and I guess I apologize for them being so different, because yeah, they are really different, and I guess they look like, we're saying one school's different than another. It's just a very different meetings, so that's why they were that way. If you want to look at the comparisons, that's something we wanted to bring up. Danielle and I did do comparisons of 4 schools. It's a spreadsheet. It's something that I think we wanted to bring to the board. We talked about it before, but we have finished it. And that's something we'd like to make available to people so they can look at those differences between the schools, the spreadsheets. The other thing that we did was, did you make these public, the graphs yet?
No.
Okay, so I took the survey results and what was made public was just overall, what were the choices for 5th, 6th, and 7th. So I broke them out for 5th, for 6th, and for 7th. And I know people are saying, overwhelmingly everybody wants Co-Brown, but that really isn't the case. It's like 60%, 53%. So it is a majority, but it certainly isn't 90% saying they want Co-Brown. So I want to make that very clear. If you look at the percentages, it's not that. It's more of a, 60, 40, 55, 45 kind of thing. You can do the numbers. I've done them myself, but I'm not going to pull that out right now. The other thing I did was, one of the questions we asked was what would be your choice if busing was only provided to CHS? And the reason that we said that was because we already have a lot of students in CHS, so we have to provide busing in CHS. So that's why we asked the question. And so I put in these graphs, I have like Co-Brown, and I didn't do it for Concord. I think parents maybe didn't quite understand this question because a lot of people if you already have busing to Concord and that's your first choice, why would you pick another school? And they were picking a second choice. That doesn't really make sense to me. But, so I did it for, Co-Brown. What would be your first choice? So, I mean, your second choice of busing. So a lot of people still pick Co-Brown. So that's kind of telling us that, okay, maybe they're planning on dropping the kids off and picking them up. CHS is actually, that was the #1 choice of Concord High. And then Pembroke Academy was second, Co-Brown was third. But hopefully we're gonna make these public so people can see these, yeah?
Yeah.
We can talk about that.
Yeah, so I will say, I think questions 1 and 2 on the survey had the clause about busing.
So it's the first one is, what is your first choice?
It was
The second
first
one
choice,
was,
assuming
if-
busing only goes to Concord.
yeah, yeah,
That was question number 1.
yes, okay,
And then question number 2 was, what's your second choice, assuming that busing's only going to Concord?
okay, all right. All right,
So that's the one thing I was confused about,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
because
Oh, so the first
I
section
thought we
is
just
by
said what was
grade.
the first.
This first three
First
that you
one's
did were
just by grade.
But yes, I think it did, the disclaimer was busing on both.
On
pages.
both.
Okay, I didn't think we had
Yes.
that on both questions. I thought we just asked. I'll have to look at that. I didn't think we had that. All right, and then the last one was, we wanted to see what were the main reasons people were giving these first choices. We had given like academic excellence, academic opportunities, athletics, choice of school programs, a lot of different things. We asked people to pick 3. Many people picked 6, 5, 4, whatever. I just put them all in. So this just has it, and you can't see it when it's black and white. You have to see it when it's color, obviously, because you can see the difference by color. But this just gives you an idea of why people chose the school that they chose.
so back to that, where people were choosing multiple, we had multiple people who, when we said, what is your first choice of high school,
Yeah.
people chose multiple schools.
Yeah, it's only like maybe 3 or 4 that did that. And so if they did that, I didn't put it in because I didn't know what their first choice was.
Right.
Because it does it alphabetically. I mean, it would have been nice if it was like a ranking, but I didn't even think to make it a ranking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think there was some confusion when we published the initial results
Right.
because the number of how many chose Co-Brown, Concord, et cetera, didn't match up with the number of responses.
Right. So I actually did, when I went back, I eliminated about 4 responses just because they gave multiple responses.
So that, I feel like if we're gonna publish any sort of graphs, we need to sort of make that
We can put
clear
that in there, sure.
and put a disclaimer of like,
Yeah.
it's gonna,
I can go back and count how many it is, but I think it was only about 4.
just
4
because like if
responses.
people look at this and compare it to the thing we initially put
Yeah.
out, the numbers are going to be different.
Yeah, it might be a bit different.
And I did try to explain that on Facebook, but who knows if
Yeah.
anyone saw my explanation.
Yeah. And
So-
and it skews the last question too, like what your
Right,
reason for choice, because not everybody picked 3 choices, so.
Yeah,
But I just figured it was still good to have that information. They thought it was important.
so I would just request like
Yep.
the one about busing, I would just take a look at that.
Yeah, I'm gonna
again.
look at that again. I have it there. Yeah, okay. I will do that. Yes.
Thanks for the clarification on the notes. I think that the point about the difference between, we have a relationship with Concord, for 20 years, we know a lot about Concord.
Right,
We don't know as much about.
right.
Brown as
It was a
important.
very different meeting.
Right, and I think that also worth mentioning is the fact that Co-Brown is a public academy, which just has different rules than Concord does, so
Right.
that's going to also change the questions that you ask. And thirdly, we're still at the stage where I would imagine the information you're looking for is for the board. It's not, we're not like at the point in the process of trying to publicize and that's not where we are. So the notes are for the board, and it's important obviously to keep the public
Right.
apprised of what we're doing.
Right.
But they're serving a specific function, and it was not the point to create a, call it like. a
Yeah,
listing.
thank you for the clarification. Yeah, it wasn't like we had a set of questions and we went to each school and asked
Right.
those questions. It was, we're in different places.
And I was gonna say, I think in addition to that too, I mean, we had, we had some questions in mind to ask, but when we went to one school, you know, it was very much led by us. We go to another school and it was very much led by
Yeah,
the other school. So
Yeah.
we were very limited with the information that we could get from some.
right, and I mean, for instance, in Concord, we wanted to know what would the tuition rates be, and they're, you know, right, they're not gonna give it that, because they need to go back and talk to people, right? Whereas Co-Brown, they make no negotiations, so boom, this is it, right, so it's easy to get that information.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Nate. Like, these are not intended to help people decide if we have a choice where to go.
Can I also wanted to clarify, I know there was another comment about, you know, some of the questions that were asked of Co-Brown, like, you know, what do they do with behavioral students and stuff like that? And some of those questions were also led by comments that had been made in the public previously, so it's kind of like just clarification, you know, this is what's said, so now it's on record by the school, you know, there can be no more, you know, that's not what happens, or this is what happens, it's kind of cut and dry.
I do think for Co-Brown, that has a private board that doesn't have public meetings, does not publish their minutes. It's a little bit, it's not elected. It is harder for us to discern a lot of how they operate. So to the extent we're questioning how they operate, it's because it's not public and we don't know. So it isn't like a regular public school in the sense that they're not accountable to the voters. So we don't always, it's not transparent. We can't just march into their board meetings and demand things.
As a just note in the process and where we are, I think this conversation is sort of why we maybe erred too much perhaps last time on not publishing every single thing. And we didn't tell, you know, we were much more, secretive isn't the right word, but we held all of this stuff and we weren't very open about it. When we're open about it, it creates more questions, which are good, but it's like, we're in the middle of the process and this is how it works. And we want to let people know, but it does also cause confusion when we let people know when we're in the middle of the process. So it's like, it's just
Right.
messy either way.
But I also welcome a lot of the comments,
Yeah.
because I think that those good comments about, you know, let's compare I mean, I know in my gut special ed's more expensive, but let's make sure. Let's do the numbers, right? So one other thing that really jumped out at me, I don't know, people maybe don't want to hear this, but they were very clear when we were talking about the kids and having to get other services and if there was other placement, where they said, they're your kids, not ours. And that, wow, that really like hit me. What do you mean? Like, they're not your kids? And so we just sort of let it go. Danielle and I talked about it afterwards. And then in the Concord meeting, we didn't say anything to them, but they started talking about it. They said, you know, Deerfield kids come, and then we don't even know they're Deerfield kids anymore. They're our kids. They're all just part of our community. It was just a very different feel. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That just surprised me. So I did put that in the notes, but I just wanted to make a point of that. That was just a surprise.
Okay.
That's all I've got. So I will put that information on those. I'll check the question and then I'll let you know, and then you can make
Yes.
those public, okay?
Yep, and then, in terms of next steps for high school, you guys are meeting, you have more meetings or negotiations
Well,
lined up.
We have another meeting with Concord set up, and hopefully we'll get some numbers from them. It's pretty hard to be figuring out what we're gonna do if we don't get tuition numbers from them.
Yeah.
So we've asked them a couple questions. We said, what would you charge us if we just had an MOU with you? What would be the minimum number of kids that you would take and be our school of record or have a contract with them? And then what would that tuition rate be? So that was, those are the,
I think so.
I think,
Just different scenarios,
Yeah,
give
right.
us some numbers so we know
Right.
we can compare.
so then we can think about how we might wanna do it. Yeah.
Great. So we have the meeting July 19th. And I think,
In our meetings before that, that's pretty short. 13th.
Yeah. so hopefully we can
Yeah, so hopefully we'll have
make
something.
good progress July 19th in deciding
Yeah.
and potentially voting on a plan. Cool. All right, anything else? Okay, so we do not need a second non-public. Were there any nominations or resignations? No? Okay, we are back to public comments.
Roads, Church Street. One comment, several times this evening, the number 45 million has been thrown out in connection with the plan. And the plan as described included the community center. 45 million does not include the community center. So that ought to be clear. That's a big number difference, or you know, money for value, value for money difference. In terms of reaching the community, I've sat in front of this body before and suggested they use the Deerfield Gazette for that. As an example, we just put out a Gazette last weekend. We already have questionnaires back from people who filled out the questionnaire and sent it in, and they didn't even have instructions, our fault, for where to send it. So just as a measure of effectiveness, you may want to consider that as a means of reaching, you know, I think you have to be specific in terms of your questions, and because we only come out quarterly, so you know, you only have so many opportunities a year. My last comment would be that I'm obviously disappointed in the decision regarding the paving. The RSA does specify that the plan needed to be developed in consultation with the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission never heard from anybody developing that plan. So I'm skeptical that the terms of the warrant article were in fact met. We heard about it, we were invited to a meeting, we made recommendations. Those were recommendations, casual musings, but they were recommendations based on a soil scientist's review of the plan, but the plan had already been developed. We'd never seen it before at the Conservation Commission. So you may want to think about that in terms of you know, whether you can automatically go and get the money out of the trust fund, because the trust fund's got to, the trustees have to follow the terms of the warrant article, and the warrant article specifically says that it requires consultation in the development of the plan, which is not what happened. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments?
Kimberly Black, Meeting House Hill. And a post a couple days ago, you guys had said bring your ideas to the board about what you were thinking. So kind of, I emailed you, but just kind of wanted to follow up. Similar to what their presentation was about putting a plan or an extension off to the left side was kind of my idea as well, to be able to expand the nursing station. I think that's really critical, having preschoolers and kindergartens in this building, because that's not what the building was originally laid out for. And I think the nursing station really needs more space for that. And then just building at least 4 more classrooms, and I'd like to move the library downstairs. And in doing that, also being able to bring at least 1 art room and 1 music room downstairs, so that there's an elementary level teacher. And I understand that it's probably not ideal now that there's multiple teachers and they might have to share classrooms or adjust how they balance out the classrooms. But I really think it's critical that we move those specials downstairs to accommodate those first and second graders. And part of my plan was really just 4 classrooms and a library downstairs in the wing, but it would have room for upstairs or expanding out. But I think that way would be the way to go, and really minimal. I think that even more minimal than what their plan is with a common area. I think it's ideal, but I don't think we're just going to get the buy-in from the community. I think we really need to stick with the bare minimum needs, and then get resourceful on what kind of spaces that alleviates elsewhere. So we could get 4 classrooms and a library, and then even a second floor. That's approximately an 80 by like 85 square foot. It brings up just under what their square foot idea was, but I think it's something. It's not everything, but I think it would be somewhere. So that's just my thoughts on that. And then I just wanted to make a note about high school stuff. So Cole Brown has records of students attending since 1907. So it's not new. I understand that this board is more familiar, and a lot of the community is more familiar with the past 15 years. We entered into that contract in 2004. Prior to that, the students did have to apply. Also, Concord was exclusive, and Pembroke. They turned people down for their own reasons. And I definitely respect that you guys have a lot more information about what the future would look like for students to continue at Concord. But the idea that Co-Brown is some foreign thing that students hadn't gone to is really kind of just upsetting to me, having been a Co-Brown student myself and knowing other people, and that they have an over 100-year history and families with generations that have gone there for years. So I believe it was 2014 or 2015 that they stopped the lottery. So students were going on their own dime or for other reasons, but it's not that foreign. I mean, we're looking at 15 years, not 50. So thank you.
Thank you.
I beat it. Yeah.
I wasn't planning on speaking at the end, so I hope this comes out okay. I'm not good off the cuff. A small group of us come to meetings and give suggestions. And yes, it is your job to listen to those suggestions. You were elected by the community, the town of Deerfield. And if I remember, by quite a majority. To me, that means that the voters trusted what they heard from you during your election. And they are trusting you to make the right decisions for the entire town of Deerfield. We are all stakeholders in this school, whether we currently have children in it or we don't. We are all taxpayers. I'm getting very concerned about what the cost of one line item is going to be on my tax bill when it comes. Fortunately, I'm in a situation where I can swing it. My dog may not get groomed as many times, but I can swing it somehow. There are many people in this community who can't, and they don't come forward and speak. We need to remember them. They voted for you because they trust you to make the right decisions for the town of Deerfield. I'm also concerned about DCS. That is my heart and home for 38 years of my life as a teacher and as a parent. And I heard the architect say, there are parts of this building that are due for failure. We can't get budgets passed as it is. So I am hoping, because you were voted and trusted by the entire town of Deerfield, that yes, you will listen to the suggestions made by the few of us that come, but you will remember who voted for you. And I wish they would come. I wish they would talk to you, because I do talk to a lot of people in town, both with kids, without kids, who have lived here forever or forever, who have just moved here. They have a lot to say. They don't come, some of them, because they don't feel comfortable coming and speaking. I wish they would. I wish there was a way we could get them, because you were elected by them, not just a small population that come. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Stacey Marchioni, Meeting House School Board. So just briefly on Co-Brown, I would say that though it's a public academy and they have private meetings, the proof is in the pudding, essentially. So the evidence of how the school operates is in student achievement, student satisfaction, and parental satisfaction, which are all very high at Co-Brown. So while you might not, they might have a private board, doesn't mean that you can't see how they operate. They operate in a way that puts out highly successful and happy students and satisfies parents. It's a market economy. Kids go there, and they'll pay tuition to go there. So that's what I would say about that. I wanted to speak to the fire code at DCS. So I don't know if you've looked at the fire inspection reports for DCS. I know the fire panel is being replaced, but there's a very serious violation that's been in place at DCS since 2019 on the fire inspection reports. DCS has failed fire safety inspection for stairwell under the storage under the stairwells. It's item number 30 on the fire inspection reports. It has failed 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, and it'll fail again in 23 unless something is done about it. You are not allowed to store items in the stairwells. Is it better? Yes. You're also not allowed to store clothing in the stairwells. And I would say that this is a serious fire hazard. It's something that needs to be addressed. I know that there are storage issues, but some place has to be found for all of that stuff to go. If you look at the fire inspection notes, the fire chief has said that in 2019, the stairwell plan being addressed under mutually agreed action plan. 2020 says the same. 2021, stairwell storage being addressed by future building remodel. 2022, stairwell storage, we're working with the school to clean up and organize space to eliminate stairwell storage. But it's been an ongoing issue for over 5 years. And nothing that we discuss, whether it's high school or parking lot or building, whatever, is as important as fire safety for the kids, the staff, the administrators that are in this building. So I've been talking to John Dubianski about this for months. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed before kids come back into the building in the fall. Everything in the stairwells needs to go somewhere else. And we've had discussions, parents are have said, I'll come and help move it wherever you find. Maybe you need to get a storage unit. I don't know. Will it be inconvenient for teachers? It might be, but life safety is going to trump that every single day. So I would encourage you and ask you to please address that once and for all. In this hallways as well, they have to be 6 feet wide, but you also can't go from a wide area to a narrow area. So if you have 6 foot wide with no encumbrances in the hallway, like no chairs, and then you go to a section of the hallway that has chairs that narrow the hallway, that's a fire code violation because you're creating a clogging point. So as we talk about fire safety, this is something I think that needs to be addressed. And I think there are a lot of parents that would help. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay. Right, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn? Make a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor? Aye.